welcome to another edition of Zero Fucks Given. I'm Carson Block of Muddy Waters and Zer0s. This is an empty chair that normally belongs to Krista DeLuca. She's sadly not with us anymore. And this is a pillow that symbolizes Freddy, who usually has to sit on top of it over there. So sitting in for Freddy without a pillow, because he's a normal-sized human being.
He definitely has monkeypox. 100%.
is Soren Aandahl of Blue Orca.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's not guys, it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, thanks for like kneeling in for Freddy, sitting in for Krista.
Kind of a weird way to put it, but okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, man.
I don't know. I mean, it's yeah.
Monkeypox can happen to anybody.
Well, they were going to change the name, right? Because in order to try to get people to take it more seriously. I mean, after you've had like coronavirus, it's like
the cat's out of the bag to mix the metaphors, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But why'd you show up looking so stylish? Like, I have a problem with this. All right, you're dressed far better for this than I am. You won't partake. You won't imbibe, which is kind of like a cardinal sin.
I'm not like a big weekday drinker. I think like I've got to work out later because
we all do.
Yeah, but I can't work out after I've pounded a couple beers. Like the day in productivity will be over. Yeah,
I know, but it's the thought at the beginning of the day that counts. That's what I've learned. Like if you get up and you're like, here's my plan. I'm going to go work out at this time. Like, you've done most of what you need to do as a responsible human being.
Mental energy in it.
You have.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like, you're having kids soon, probably. So, like, I guess once you have kids, you'll maybe start looking at the world more.
Just really looking forward to daytime drinking a lot more.
that and it's the intention that counts, right? When it comes to working out, like you were going to do it for most of the day. It's just got sidetracked. So, all right. Well, anyway, all seriousness, thank you for being here. I think a good way to start off, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but you used to be partners with somebody else. You had this firm called Glaucus Research.
Yeah.
And you guys were actually the first short activists in Japan, I think.
I don't know if we were very early for sure. I think Andrew Leff might have done one.
Oh shit! You know what? You're right. He did
Japan
the robotic suit thing.
The fake robotics company.
Yeah.
I think that he was early.
But
we were. I think but that was I think this matters when you talk about Japan. But I think that was it was a company that was very peripheral in terms of like political importance or the financial markets, which I think is likely more successful than our foray.
But the untold story of your guys' activism. Okay, and this is what I think nobody understood why you really did this, your ulterior motivation. So let me rewind.
Kind of curious about this. Okay.
Well, okay, so years ago, Freddy, Matt, and I had dinner in San Francisco, your former partner, Matt, and you told this story, and the next day, Freddy and I came into the office, and we realized just how truly fucked up we were because we didn't react at the time. But the story was something about how you had been in an orphanage in Japan as a child, and they used to pluck your red hairs out and study it.
So my grandparents started an orphanage in southern Japan, which is still there today, and it's a phenomenal place. It's an incredible place, not only their legacy, but growing up, my parents, as they're wont to do, if kids get annoying, they're like, okay, instead of shipping us off to summer camp, we got shipped off to the orphanage for a couple of weeks. And we loved it. It was, it was a great place. Like it was just a wonderful, it was a wonderful part of our family's legacy. We loved going to Japan. We still do. But the only thing that was unusual is a pretty rural part of Japan where it's located. And especially in the 80s when I was growing up, they had never seen someone with red hair. So kids would pluck my hair and then put it in like Ziploc bags to keep as a keepsake, which as a kid, it like felt a little weird, but maybe it didn't feel as weird as.
But didn't it feel good then coming back after all these years and being like, fuck you, this is what you get?
Yeah, I mean, right. So it's a real mixed bag there because you get like, obviously teased a lot as a kid if you have red hair. It's like, so all the times, someone
In
says,
Japan
like,
or here?
Here. In
Oh.
Japan, you're a fucking god. Here, it's
Really?
like fucking ginger piece of shit. Like, yeah. So
Now,
I felt a little bit good about that.
did the South Park guys create the whole thing about like gingers not having souls, or
No, go to England.
or did you
They're
not
the
really have
worst about
souls
it.
before
But no,
that?
We're fully sold up. We're full.
Really?
Tanks full. Tanks full. 100%.
Okay. All right.
100%. But it's fun. My wife uses that sometimes. Really, it's great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, right on. Well, anyway, so that was my whole thing
Thanks for bringing
with
back
short
these
activism.
memories of being bullied as a child. I really appreciate that.
No, you've shown them all.
Yeah,
You've won. All right, cool. Well, so you wanted to talk some, more. That was ancient history. You want to talk some recent stuff?
Yeah, but I mean,
here.
like, to finish up on the topic of Japanese activism, I think, do you think that Japan obviously is in the news a lot recently. There's the return of the widowmaker trade. There's this question of whether the Bank of Japan is going to be able to maintain
the currency at 135.
Right, whether they're basically going to be able to hold the yield curve where it is, or else, whether there's going to be political pressure for the currency to depreciate. They're coming up on an election. There's rising food and energy costs. And it's a really politically sensitive topic because you have a domestic population that not only is shrinking, but has basically endured like 20 plus years of stagflation.
What are you guys modeling for inflation second half of the year in Japan?
Obviously, that's proprietary. My Japan macro guy is also out with monkeypox, so I don't have that data right here. So as I said last time, we don't take a ton of macro bets. And usually when a short seller or someone who does fundamental analysis on companies starts spouting off about their macro predictions, that's, to paraphrase Goring, that's when you reach for your gun.
Well, either that or that's when they just had their first like really big successful short.
Right. When you have your first really big successful trade in anything, you become an expert on everything overnight.
Yes.
It's amazing. I recommend it. But, it's interesting because we've often looked at, Japan as, there's potential activist candidates because, I think by and large, like the governance in Japan, it's a different type of, when governance breaks down, it's a different type of breakdown. I don't think that you don't get like the scourge of the Chinese and Hong Kong markets is basically companies that from the beginning are designed to be frauds and to defraud the capital market. I think in Japan, when you see misallocations between price and fundamental value, and especially short opportunities, on account of governance, I think it's often on account of either disappointment fraud, like where there's a business that's deteriorating and essentially they don't want to come clean about it to the markets or their shareholders or even sometimes their bosses. And that's where that's a pretty good use case for activism, which is like a, kind of a fresh, here's a fresh dissenting opinion on something that's very liquid and well covered. And also, the Japanese sell-side analysts are, potentially even more incestuous than in the US, which is impressive.
Yeah.
That's hard to do.
Now, I just want to be clear about one thing, though. I didn't actually really want to talk about activism in Japan. I was just trying to bring back your childhood traumas.
Yeah, but now we've touched on something that's
But that's that's because it's because you fucked with me the other week on my Maui Jim sunglasses. So
dude, those are brutal.
Not that,
no amount of my childhood bullying is going to bring back the fact that those Maui Jim sunglasses are not cool. That's a false equivalence. I mean, would you guys ever consider? You guys have done an idea in Japan. Would you ever consider doing it again?
Well, every now and then when you look at it and you say, "Wow, liquid and easy to borrow, CDS,
GC, lots of debt usually."
Yeah, we've done two things in Japan, I think. So we
did
NIDAC.
You guys did NIDAC.
Yeah, which you want to talk about like the most. Yeah, the circumferency of the Japan Analyst Corps actually exceeds that of the China Analyst Corps,
which
amazing. I never thought I would witness in my life, but it does, especially with respect to NIDAC and Nagamori-san, and like this guy had a comic book, made of himself. Like the man who shines brighter than the sun is the fucking title of this comic book.
That's
and he shows him as like
cool.
Yeah, it's like a little child who was awake like 25 hours a day, like helping his parents and getting straight A's and shit.
That's pretty cool.
I mean,
Like, don't you want? I want a comic book like that about me. That'd be amazing.
I don't know. It's really that hard to have one made about you. Like he had it made.
I don't know. Is it like are the illustrations like interesting and good to look at? Have you guys have a copy?
Well, they're like the Japanese, like the one eye closed, like dude fist in the air, like flying, like that. Like it's all that shit, right? Like you could do that. Hair like flying out.
Yeah,
like that.
like manga, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Not hentai, which you're obviously familiar with, which is different.
Oh, that's the filthy.
Yeah, don't worry
comments.
about it. I don't know. Would you guys ever do it?
I thought that was like the temporary tattoo thing.
Temporary tattoo thing.
Oh, that's henna.
Henna, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
that's not.
Yeah.
Would you? I don't know. I mean, I don't think.
So
I
then
think
the other one we did was
yeah.
Peptidream, which that one's like the airs come out of that quite a bit. Yeah, the problem is so when we were looking to do NIDAC, and we went and started talking to PR firms, they were all no because of you guys. Because you guys had come out first and you had a PR firm, and I guess that really boomeranged on them and on the PR firm. Like I think we started first with that PR firm, and they're just like, we apologize.
I mean, I think the Japan is interesting from an activism case because you have more than any market I've ever seen. Like I've seen markets where there's regulatory opposition to activism. I've seen markets where there's like essentially entrenched financial interests that prevent it, but like there's a cultural entrenchment against activism, which is I think a really difficult. Like,
but we're talking short activism here, not long.
But long activism is difficult there too. I mean, like Dan Loeb has done it well. Seth Fisher at Oasis has done it pretty well. Like there's people that have broken into long activism in Japan, but I think even they'll tell you that it's tough. Like it takes a lot of investment. And I think what's unusual about Japan as well is that their financial market participants are by and large Japanese speakers. And so that like this idea like Hong Kong of doing work and like basically, all your diligence resources or a lot of them are in English, like that's just not the case, which I think makes it.
Well, it's a very retail market. Like that's
and a really retail driven market.
That's the thing with Peptidream. Yeah. So the chairman of Peptidream, I mean, we had photos of this where he used to do these road shows, pretty much had been to every prefecture in Japan, like speaking to rooms filled with retirees, like pitching the fucking stock.
Right.
And I think he used to.
Well, they have massive savings rates, right? And,
no, but I mean, it was just, it was so twisted I mean, like when CEOs going around and like pumping the stock to retirees. I mean, to me, that's like in person holding these big seminars and, you'd say, oh, a traditional pharmaceutical company is like an old film truck. And
it sounds like a Trump real estate seminar or something like
that. Dude, Trump would have learned a few things, right? From like Trump would have totally liked this. But all right, so Japan. I think we, everything everybody needs to know about Japan we've just covered.
Fair enough.
So like you.
Still my favorite place in the world, but okay.
No, it's well, it is a great place. When I was in college, I went to Tokyo. No, I wasn't Mr. Tokyo. Just this chick told me she thought I was. But,
Mr. Tokyo?
Well, it was Tokyo Nights. The USC Japan club they rented out. It was supposed to be. Like, it was supposed to be a charity event.
I was Mr. Tokyo.
Dude, I was there to get laid. I mean, like bottom line. And
okay.
Well, the woman who nominated me for Mr. Tokyo was. She was.
Do you have to be like Swayze in the Chippendale sketch?
She was willing. No. It had to be me.
Well, it sounds like Mr. Tokyo. You have to wear like a no shirt and a bow tie or something like that.
Dude, no.
All right.
It was. I mean,
do you have any pictures of Mr. Tokyo? You should put one on
I might have had like a videotape back in the day, but
it's probably not aged well.
Aged better than I have, but yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Don't want to talk about Japan. I think one thing that's interesting is Sunny Balwani's trial is wrapping up. I think that if for people that sort of follow the space and follow financial fraud, especially in private markets or pre-IPO markets, I think that Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos has been a fascinating exercise in whether the rules of white-collar crime still essentially apply in America. And I think there was a lot of nihilism. Like I think I've told this story before where I pulled my class that I teach at UT in the spring, and there was a uniform acknowledgement that even though she committed fraud, demonstrable fraud, that she would never be punished for it. And I don't know what that says about.
What has she been sentenced?
She has not been sentenced. I believe
Okay.
that she gets sentenced after Sonny's trial. But my feeling is that Sonny is not only going to be convicted, but I think that he might even serve longer than her, which is.
Well, I mean, she got pregnant, of course, while she was.
It shouldn't matter, but
You know it will.
But it's interesting that Sonny's trial coincides with, I mean, and his defense strategy is essentially some variety of just blaming everything on her, which in fairness to him, even though he probably, I mean, if you've read some of the text messages, he comes across as like the least sympathetic defendant for some time.
Well, her whole defense strategy was blaming everything on him.
Even though she started committing fraud like well before he arrived, which was basically one of the big problems. And also like that just wasn't faithful, I think, to the evidence. But it's interesting that the same week that he's basically going to get his conviction or acquittal, I guess, is going to come down is Martin Shkreli's out. And Martin Shkreli's starting to pop up again. I've already have 2 people email me his analysis on Mark Cuban's new drug company. It's really good. The guy's really compelling. I think he's going to make a huge comeback. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic. Like, he obviously served 5 years, I believe, 5 years in federal prison. What's interesting, though, is like you could argue that had he, not argue, I mean, this is a question. Like, do you think that if he wasn't so deliberately a jerk, that he would have been criminally prosecuted?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an interesting one.
Because people didn't lose money. I mean, he lied. Basically, what he did was the fund had poor returns, and he lied about the returns, but he paid people back with the proceeds of an investment that he used with the fund money.
Now, I do remember, and it wasn't fraud, but one of my favorite facts that came out early on was that he stuffed BAML like they lost $10. So like
that's awesome.
Yeah, so like I'll always thank Martin for that one, I guess. But yeah, it's it's interesting. I mean, he certainly had. I mean, he must have been the most politically clueless motherfucker in all of America when it's 2016 presidential election. The one thing that both Hillary Clinton and Trump were talking about was prescription drug pricing, and he went on CNBC and just with this completely bizarre affectation defended as morally right what he was doing with Turing.
In his defense, other people were doing exactly the same thing.
But he didn't, like, he compared himself to Toyota Motors. And
McKinsey was helping get people hooked on opioids. Like,
well, okay, but if we're at this, if
we're not doing relative,
if we're doing this whataboutism, no, I mean, and obviously that wasn't why he was convicted.
But it was why they went after him.
Well, he became the poster child for it. And then look, he also did some pretty stupid shit there where he was on trial when he put out a bounty for somebody to give him a lock of Hillary Clinton's hair.
His bail was immediately revoked.
And then when he was in prison, he's running his company from prison. Like, he's got, a cell phone that I guess was smuggled in. And I mean, he's not the only guy doing that. But then he told this Wall Street Journal reporter, he bragged to the Journal reporter about how he was running his company from the cell phone. So of course that got taken away. So I mean,
prison, not exactly a great place.
This doesn't go to culpability, but my point being that there's some really odd judgment calls that this guy made. I mean, that doesn't go to whether he's intelligent or not. I don't know, or whether he knows the industry. Should people be sentenced for
being an asshole, or should they be sentenced for the conduct that they do that violates the law?
Well, okay, so a few weeks ago, after Bill Hwang was indicted, I called up a lawyer who specializes in stock manipulation. And I was going through the indictment and the SEC complaint as well. And I honestly, like, a lot of these things that are in there, I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think
he's gonna get. Yeah, I agree.
So I was like, I don't know. Like, this doesn't seem to hold water to me. And I know in my bones Bill Hwang manipulated GSX, right? Like, these. But so anyway, I'm having this conversation with him, and he's saying, look, I get what you're saying. You're not wrong. I think when you look at the totality of circumstances, that looks like manipulation, blah, blah, blah. But then he finished with, he's like, but okay, let's be totally honest here. If Archegos didn't blow up, Bill Hwang doesn't get indicted. Okay, like he's indicted because he blew up. Now, similar to, it's basically, similar to Enron or a lot of these, like a lot of situations where, it seems like it's only deemed bad because it was a shocking failure, but it wasn't bad or problematic until there was a shocking failure.
I think you have to distinguish between instances in which the failure reveals the fraud and there's failure that co-occurs or may co-occur with fraud.
But with GSX, we're all screaming from the top of our lungs. This is manipulation. Okay. This is manipulation.
Can I make a counterpoint to that? And I know that you know GSX well. You're the primary victim of it getting rammed straight down Main Street. Bill Hwang was simply buying stock, and he was trying to essentially corner the market on public equities. Like, is it manipulative? Like, he didn't lie about it. He didn't say, like GSX is a fantastic company that I'm going to take private or anything like that. He just, for example, with Viacom, he just bought a bunch of Viacom, and whenever it looked like he had bought so much Viacom that it was about to come down, he went to Credit Suisse and was like, yo,
okay,
I need more freaking Viacom. And they gave it to him. And so I would argue that his exit, he had no exit from this position, because basically with a company like Viacom, even if you engineer a short squeeze, at some point you're going to jack the price up enough that they're just going to issue equity, and you might get margin called. Like, is there any particular rule against that conduct?
So look, there's a lot to unpack there, and some of what you're saying are points that I brought up. So, I think the the idea behind manipulation is, you're trading to impact the price of a stock when you don't believe it's worth that much. Okay, so it's not manipulative if you're buying a stock to keep a floor under it because there's a lot of selling, but you think it's worth this. But that harkens back to an era of investing or what have you that no longer exists, where this idea that everybody sits here and thinks like, oh, gee, what's the fundamental value of this? Like, well, if I put a PE ratio of this. So here's the thing.
Okay.
In today's markets, far more than in the past, what determines the price is often technical factors. It's flows.
Okay.
So this is where I kind of have a problem with this idea that, you're saying, well, he's buying it even though he does, he's not listening. So the DOJ and SEC are saying he stopped listening to his analysts, who thought that these things were overvalued and that they should get out of them. He stopped holding research meetings. He was talking only with traders. It's like, well,
yeah, but it's irrelevant.
But,
right?
Well, it is and it isn't. Under that old construct of you have to have an idea. You have to have some idea of what the fundamental value is, and if it's trading well above that and you're buying it, then you must be manipulating. Maybe under that. But here's the thing: when you look at today's modern market and you say, okay, well, this all trades on flows. This thing is in these China indices, these education indices. The float is only this. And you've got, HFTs and algo traders out there. And so I don't know what the company would be worth if you sold this in a private equity transaction, but I'm telling you that as a public company, that stock should be a lot higher because of the technicals. See, that's where this can kind of fall apart.
So I have it. Okay. I think you're correct. I think you're absolutely correct.
Like, you can have a divergent view of what it's worth based on technicals and fundamentals.
Neither the government nor the market nor society is or should be in the business of evaluating the reasonableness of good faith investment opinions. And I think with Bill Hwang, fine, he may have stopped meeting with his research analysts, but it's not our job to. I don't think that we should be going retrospectively and saying, were his beliefs that Viacom would trade for this level, or what was the, were these reasonable opinions?
So yeah, I agree. I think the Viacom, I think the XGSX stuff is thin.
Right.
GSX to me, when I haven't, I didn't state this earlier, but what I think differentiates GSX, aside from the fact that it was an obvious fraud.
And that it happened to you.
That it happened to me, right? Was that you had, like you had this guy who used to work for Bill Hwang, Tao Li of Tengyue. So he's advisor one in Bill Hwang's indictment.
Right.
Okay, so the DOJ laid out that there was already some coordination between the two, but if there were a lot more coordination than that in terms of when to buy, and at the same time you had this one, asshole in Singapore named Tien who had this fund QQQ who was bragging about selling puts at the same time. Now, if these three guys were coordinating, and this was all, and management was involved, because my God, I remember when Shanghai Securities picked up coverage with a strong buy, it gapped up 25% that morning.
That's different. There's no question. But I would say
even without, when Shanghai Securities picked up, who the fuck are they, right? Who in America has cared? The market cap is already 15, 20 billion. Shanghai Securities, which whatever, issues a strong buy recommendation, I think, on a Monday. Stock opens up 25% because there's a bunch of buying in the pre-market. Now, if that was coordinated, then that says to me, that's manipulation.
I think with, I don't know a lot of the details on that. The indictment's pretty light on them, but
it doesn't get into that.
It doesn't get into that.
Which is the disappointment to me.
Everyone looked at Bill Hwang and his use of credit and his use of swaps as this is something in the market which poses potentially systemic risk. And what's hilarious is that it's not as if the banks were making that much money doing it, which is incredible, because you're wow, you Credit Suisse, you're almost, you don't want to kick Credit Suisse again, but here goes. You don't want to bankrupt your company.
This week in Credit Suisse.
Over 15 million, over a 15 million in fees on a swap account. But
well, hang on.
Well,
if you work at Credit Suisse, why would you care? It's not set up to make you care.
Okay.
So
fair enough. But I think the question is I think what obviously was always going to happen was that the minute he stopped corner, or if he got the prices high enough, that the companies were simply going to issue equity and that he would be margin called given the size of his positions. It wasn't a sophisticated operation. It was, I'm going to buy and it's going to go up. I don't see what the difference is between Bill Hwang behaving in that way and the millions of traders on Reddit or stock twits that every day are we should all buy shit coins, or we should all buy whether it's GameStop or Bed Bath and Beyond. Those people have no real fundamental belief in I would argue, or in the long-term cash flows of the business as we currently understand it. But they would look to me and they say, shut the fuck up, boomer. Even though I'm not a boomer, they'd be it doesn't matter. They would argue that they're investing on technical flows as well. And they have every right to buy a stock that they like, regardless of the quality of their reasonableness or the reasonableness of their analysis. I don't see much difference between them and Bill Hwang.
Well, and then I think both should kind of be allowed in the capital market. Go a level deeper. What about all the algo traders? See, does a computer have a good faith belief in what the value of something is? I bet you, especially having traded a number of these Chinese frauds over the past, several years. Some of these things are so obviously manipulated, and it must be algorithmically, right? And so I think not just in the China space, but outside of that, there's probably so much algorithmic manipulation of stocks, or that if this was done by humans, they would say it's manipulation. But the SEC has no fucking ability to parse the data, right? Because here's one of the things. It's an agency run by lawyers that tolerates some accountants hanging out. You need data analysts, top flight data analysts. I think they have
data analysts, but
come on, the dudes who'd go to work for Facebook, but really. So you're going to work if you're really a great data analyst, you're going to go work at the SEC, which is run by lawyers that barely tolerates the accountants.
No one even wants to come to work with me anymore because they can go to fucking tech company and make $1 jillion.
Yeah, and
hiring in finance has gotten demonstrably more difficult.
So this is my point. So you're a fucking schmuck if you're out there manipulating stocks as a human instead of like buying a server and like loading up whatever you need to load up on that and manipulating stocks that way. Because I feel like that goes on all day, every day, and it can't be stopped. And P.S., like, again, what's the manipulative intent of a computer, especially when it's AI, like, you know, machine learning?
But that's precisely my argument, that like there's no
Right.
difference between an algorithmic trading function and someone like Bill Hwang who wants, or someone on Reddit who basically gets together with a bunch of people and they're like, we think that if we all buy this at the same time, it's going to go up. I would argue that like we're not in the business of judging other people's the reasonableness of their good faith investment opinions. If they want to engage, if he had lied, if management was in on it, I think that that's something different. But like, I think the change that needs to happen in the market is not like we need to police people like Bill Hwang's ability to purchase stock. I think it's that potentially there should be more rules around what sort of holistic disclosure you have to give to your brokers, because that's where people argue and the government argues that he lied.
Well, and that one's interesting to me because.
But I'm not so sure there. Go ahead.
Yeah, because the thing is, I mean, when you're dealing with counterparties, and they say, you know, they don't. No hedge fund would say when they're like, hey, can you talk about your exposures? No hedge fund is saying like, well, we have, you know, this many shares of XYZ and this many shares of ABC. They give representative portfolios. Right. And the banks know this, right? They know they're not getting actual data. And they talk about approximately this, you know, approximately that, you know, rough idea. And it seems like at the end of the day, and when I was talking to this one attorney, I mean, he felt that the DOJ had a very strong case here in terms of defrauding the banks. Now, it's not bank fraud because these are the unregulated portions of the banks.
Yeah.
But he felt that they had a strong case there. But at the end of the day, it must come down to this, like the Justice Potter Stewart, I know it when I see it kind of standard, because it's like, well, you know, we're talking hypotheticals and approximations. And I guess if you're so far off the approximation, I know it when I see it, that's fraudulent. Which is tough.
The banks are the most sophisticated, well, in theory, they're sophisticated financial actors.
Especially no more in Credit Suisse.
They're sophisticated financial actors. They did not have to extend him credit.
Right.
If they wanted to say, look, like I'm uncomfortable with the disclosure that you've given me. So basically, when you read Hwang's indictment, what's interesting is that they called them and they said, hey, what level of exposure do you have to something like Viacom or GSX? And he would say 8%. And the government says that was a lie because in reality, it was a much higher percentage of the equity in your portfolio. However,
well, I mean, he was talking about supposedly he was talking about capital, like he was talking about equity. Supposedly and he was way bigger than 8%.
His counter argument, which I think is totally fair, is that when someone asks me, I don't just say equity. I give them, I could say my gross exposure is reasonable. And if a bank calls me and says, I didn't lie about the percentage of the gross exposure, they didn't specify, they didn't say what percentage of equity is it. And in fact, it was a very like casual conversation in which they would say, what, you know, how exposed are you? And I would give them a ballpark idea and that they would give me or extend my credit. Like, why are we protecting, you know, do we need new rules about this?
No, and listen,
like the bank could just say like, I'm not comfortable with that. Can I have more disclosure?
No, I'm with you on the rules thing because this idea, these like, proposed rules for disclosure on swap. Well, here's the thing: if you know, when I've debated these proposed swap disclosure rules, you know, people have said, well, they're needed because look at Bill Hwang. It's like, well, are they needed? I mean, the guy's being indicted. Like you know, so according to the government,
but the deterrence impact of an indictment, which he may or may not beat, is severely limited. Is vastly inferior to a set of rules that actors in the financial markets can follow ahead of time. Prescriptive rulemaking.
Well, no, but those rules are not limiting. Those rules are not saying that
you don't want to legislate by criminal prosecution. You want to legislate by legislation.
No, but what I'm saying is that the existing regime, if you look at the government's indictment and you believe that these allegations are true, that this is criminal conduct when he misrepresented his sizing, okay, then you say the system is sufficient because banks, without these rules that are basically going to tax the fuck out of small hedge funds like yours and mine, Like it's more bullshit that has to be done. And it's like, every year there's more and more bullshit that gets piled on that, makes it harder for us, to like afford to be in business. If you could say, well, the banks were doing fine. And the only reason that Bill Hwang became Bill Hwang here is because he criminally misled the banks, and that's why he's indicted. That says to me, we don't need no rule. We don't need new rules. Don't need no rules. The vast
I don't
majority.
want your life.
the vast majority of market participants are communicating honestly enough with their counterparties. Bill Hwang is an outlier. He's indicted. Why do we need to then, impose new rules that once again just make it hard for small asset managers to like keep our heads above water?
I think my position would be I agree with that. I think that the solution is neither. I believe that his attorneys are going to say, even on the conduct alleged, this does not constitute criminal conduct. They're going to move for a motion to dismiss just on the facts as pleaded. And I think it's a close call whether it's not or not, how the judge rules. But I think like, how do we prevent this type of systemic risk in the future? Like,
it wasn't systemic.
So then what do we care? Like, a guy made a stupid strategy. He lost a lot of money, and he cost dumb banks that lent him money and didn't ask specific follow-up questions.
Goldman didn't lose money. So
Goldman definitely didn't lose money.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
They're like, they had a meeting and they were like, everybody, we're all agreed here. We're not going to liquidate his portfolio. And the dumb banks are like, oh yeah, definitely, we're agreed. Yeah. They're like under the table and just doing it.
Oh yeah, no.
Which is also fine. I mean, that's smart.
Look, man.
If you're a Goldman shareholder, you're like, bravo, sir.
Yeah, and look, Nomura is going to Nomura. Credit Suisse is going to Credit Suisse.
So I think the easy solution is
that's
banks
kind of how it works.
If banks are uncomfortable with how much credit they're extending someone, I think that they just ask for more portfolio level disclosure. They can easily just say to him, like, A, they could say, we don't want to extend you any more credit, but B, they could say, look, we're happy to extend you a little more credit. We just need portfolio level transparency. And if he had given them that, and then they could have made a decision, but they really didn't ask. Would be my point. They didn't.
Okay.
They didn't ask.
All right. Well, so let's move on to more crime and non-punishment here then, because I want to talk about this week has brought the first and only story in crypto that I've ever thought is interesting.
Guy gets laid.
Without paying for it.
Yeah, that didn't happen. I was like, I would have seen that headline, first of all.
So, shit, man. I'm like, I can't follow that. No, okay, so, get all serious. The only thing that I have ever found interesting in crypto is the headline that that FTX is talking about ways to buy Robinhood. Yeah. Okay, so here's why I find it interesting. This dude, Sam Bankman-Fried, I'd never heard of this guy more than 4 or 5 months ago. But again, I don't pay attention to crypto. It's all, like the teachers in Charlie Brown going, womp womp whenever somebody talks crypto. But did this dude just do a funding secured? Is this a funding secured moment? Because here,
interesting.
Right. Here's what I glean. In April, basically, the filing went up on May 2nd. But in April, looks like he bought about $640 million of Robinhood. I think he paid, if I remember correctly, $9.60 a share. Okay. Last Friday, Robinhood closed below $8. So Monday, Bloomberg breaks the story that FTX is deliberating as to how it could acquire Robinhood. And the stock, Robinhood stock, straight up. Then towards the end of the day, Bankman-Fried says, well, we haven't had direct M&A discussions, but I respect them. And, stock trades off a little bit, but it's way up versus where it had been. Now, Bloomberg in September of last year wrote an article and they said that Sam Bankman-Fried is worth about $10 billion.
In April of this year?
Sorry, September of last year.
Okay, so that's
September of last year. Now,
$500 million today in crypto dollars.
Right, so that's the thing. They said they go so FTX was valued at $32 billion in its last raise, which it really is raised $1.7 billion most of which has come in the past 18 months.
Right.
And so he owns, I think they said about 50% of it supposedly. Then he's got this Alameda Research that I guess looks like it's a prop trader of crypto, and said Alameda Research, Bloomberg verified, has $13 billion of assets, almost all in Solana, as of September 21st of 2021, or either September 17th.
70 to 80%.
About 75% since. And plus, how much debt was there? Like, what was the net position? They didn't get into that. So I'm thinking that this dude, there's a good chance that most of this guy's wealth was on paper. He got a loan to buy Robinhood, and now Robinhood stock takes a shit, and somebody's saying like, hey, the value of this is down, we need more cash. And he does his version of like funding secured to yoke it back up. Now, I don't know that's the case, and a lot of this is speculation, but if you have any interest in acquiring something, the last thing you do is go and talk it up and talk about maybe acquiring it before you actually sign the fucking agreement, right? Like that's, maybe somebody leaked it, but it just, that smells to me. That seems to me like somebody has learned from the, effectively unpunished Elon Musk, how to just yoke stocks up when you need them to go up.
The headline, something shady in crypto.
Bleeds over into Robinhood.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Like, Robinhood.
Well, you see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to blame it on Elon Musk.
I know.
Come on, follow me there,
That was
man.
like a 5-minute meandering story to like blame something on Elon Musk. I don't know.
Okay, I know you want to talk about how many people in the world are circumcised, so that's much better. So let's
definitely. I can talk about the worst piece of advice that I recently gave someone, which is really, I think, kind of funny. If you don't want to talk about the markets anymore.
No, we can talk about the circumcised thing, because I do have something that light that I want to talk about before we get.
Why don't you talk about that? Let's just power through here.
So yeah, I want to talk about something pretty light.
Okay.
Abortion.
Fuck off. We're not doing that.
No. In all seriousness, because listen.
Yeah, I'm
also
also serious.
You went to law school. It's an overrated one, but it's Harvard. So and
notice I'm not wearing my merch around the podcast.
I'm dropping the CH bomb, right? And you had an illustrious career at the DOJ as a summer intern. But no, here's the thing. Like, let's not get in. It's not personal opinions on whether Dobbs is right or not. But because you're a lawyer, and and also in our field, a lot of what we've talked about so far really touches on this. The rule of law, institutions in our country. I mean, this is the one thing, and I'm friends with some people who are hard right. It's not where I am on abortion, and I said to them though, I was like, look, man. I kind of worry that the gates of hell have opened, in the sense that you had 3 Supreme Court justices confirmed who basically went through these confirmation hearings when asked about this, and even privately in meetings with senators, talking about stare decisis and basically making it sound like it's sacrosanct. And I don't know, man. Like, does this bother you that SCOTUS that this is how it happened?
Does it bother me? What do you mean? Does it bother me that?
I mean, did we have 3 justices who lied during confirmation hearings?
That's the AOC position. That's stupid.
Okay,
that's
why?
From someone who's bartender who's never had a real job. This is why I don't want to talk about this.
Okay, no.
This is like the third rail. No. I think that stare decisis, the argument that they would make essentially is that in a case like Oberfelder, you have reliance on the contract, right? So like same-sex marriages, Oberfelder is the big decision, and I think in the case like that, you have people that are organizing things like wills, estates. You're making not only parenting or family planning decisions. Like in a case like that, stare decisis would be a prominent part of the analysis, because you have a vast swath of American society that has made essentially meaningful life and economic choices based on that reliance, essentially, and the undoing that right would have negative effects. So I think that would be the argument that stare decisis would be an important and large part of the analysis here. And I think their counter argument would be, and people argue whether this was legit or not, whether this was, whether Roe and Casey should have been given the same sort of prominence in the analysis. I don't know. I think that I don't view it as the same. I don't view this narrative of the justices, lied during their confirmation hearings.
But I mean, when asked specifically about Roe, I mean, the answers were, look, stare decisis, it's precedent. I've always thought that there were problems with how the Roe opinion was written. Okay, I'm not unsympathetic to the criticisms of the legal reasoning behind it. Okay, I'm not. But I guess what I'm concerned about is that this basically says to states that have a fundamentally different view of how Dobbs should have turned out, you can't trust this court. And I don't think we're too many steps away from, the California Supreme Court basically trying to, effectively issuing a decision saying we're overruling SCOTUS precedent here because we don't think SCOTUS is a legitimate court.
Really?
I don't think we're too far away.
You think that's going to happen?
I don't think we're too far away. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but so that's why I'm curious to hear your
judges care about institutions. Every generation, the court has opinions that establish jurisprudence and that judges find abhorrent, and they enforce them all the time. I think we have devolved into a society of tribes, and that society of tribes no longer respects the institutions, and because they don't respect the outcomes of the institutions. I think that for me, the biggest takeaway always is the building blocks of society, the building blocks of how we, not only just the Constitution, but how we're organized in a way that baseline institutional respect has just been lost on both sides, right? I mean, the January 6th things are just crazy. And so I think that the notion, that's why the leak is just the biggest abhorrent. And as a clerk, you have it is such a position of trust, and the circulation of judicial memos before they're published is such a key cog in the functioning of not only the judiciary, but also the good faith give and take between judges. Anyone who's ever clerked for a circuit court or an appeals court knows that there's negotiation. There's not just negotiation, but there's good faith discussion about opinions, and when dissents and when opinions and concurrences are circulated, they really do change minds. They really do change positions, and people might argue that the functioning of that institution is basically reliant on trust, and it's massively broken.
Agree, but okay, even if you include...
So the notion that California will judges that have spent their entire life will all of a sudden, no, I don't think so. Now, when those clerks grow up, will they do it? That's a different question. But.
Okay, so then you're not concerned that this entire timeline on Dobbs fundamentally alters society's relationship to SCOTUS in a way that can effectively...
I mean, FDR tried to pack the court when they eviscerated the New Deal legislation.
And what happened was suddenly the court started ruling in favor of New Deal because they wanted to protect the institution. And I think John Roberts strongly wants to protect the institution, but the three most recently confirmed justices, look, it's pretty obvious they were put there to overrule Roe, which is fine. I think if you go through your confirmation hearings and you say, when asked about Roe, I think that it was reasoned incorrectly. I've always had a problem with it. But when you go through and you just say, yeah, look, I don't have an opinion, stare decisis, stare decisis, stare decisis, and then, here comes the pitch and you swing hard. I don't know, man. I think it
depends on what your baseline assumptions for how the Constitution and the law is interpreted by justices at that level. I think that,
well, what's society's expectation?
But society's expectation is generally wrong. Society's expectation is that there's this misconception that I have problems with originalism in the sense that the notion that every generation of people doesn't reinterpret the rules based in some ways upon their prevailing norms, that's how it actually works. Like, that's why, despite having a Bill of Rights, we suspend habeas corpus, or we put people in camps in World War II for Korematsu. I mean, this is, judicial principles are subjugated to not only expediency, but prevailing norms all the time. And it's very rare that they're able to, the notion of the judge is like this watcher on the hill, this like faithful public servant that is, with its tome of the law and is, protecting these principles from the mobs. In theory, that's how we want it to work, but in practice, it doesn't. And I think that what people underestimate with Roe is how it never became a politically settled issue after Roe, right? So it was like essentially a 50-50 split, and that was calcified upon the ruling, and those numbers in society haven't really changed that much over time. And so I think what's interesting about that is you'd expect then, like, if 90 to 90, when I went to Harvard, I took the greatest class I've ever taken in law school, which was Michael Klarman's constitutional history. And his specialty was in civil rights. It was in Brown, but it was so good because it was just an entire exercise in subverting that dumb narrative, which exists not only among lawyers, but also the general population, that of just people that believe that justices are preserving fundamental rights, and they're not basically ascribing what are sort of popular norms to interpret the document. And
I mean, I don't agree with that statement right there, where you say people believe that they are jurists whose judgments are independent of their personally held values. I don't think that, I certainly don't think that people believe that or expect that, but there's a difference between being a jurist and being a politician. And when you have a precedent that's settled for 50 years and narrowed, somewhat, but narrowed yet reaffirmed, and then you have this hyper political process that gets 3 justices confirmed, and they pay all the homage in the world when asked directly about this one case to stare decisis, and then they flatly reject stare decisis because they say that it was wrongly reasoned in the first place. The problem is, the courts don't have their own police force. They don't have a military. They can't make society courts will basically is enforced based on the
by
belief,
the executive
based on the belief that society has in the legitimacy of the court.
Yeah.
And that's my concern here, that this was such a step this is such a bridge too far, that I think I worry that this could have opened Pandora's box, basically, in terms of states.
It wasn't like the last 5 years
on top of everything else.
I mean,
but this one, look, I'm not out there, look, I'm frankly pissed off when I see those protesters in LA trying to block freeways over this thing. To me, it's the most asinine
California
shit.
Liberal.
Look, here's the one thing, and this is, I had kind of a shouting match with my mother at dinner last night, right?
Classy.
Over, it was her birthday too, but over this thing, because, she's ranting about the people on the right. I'm like, look, and again, I don't want this discussion isn't about what we personally think about abortion or what have you, but the one thing here that I say is, on both sides, everybody agrees that infanticide is one of the most horrific crimes a person can commit. The question that we wrestle over is what is infanticide? What is an infant in this process? And nobody can convince the other side otherwise, right? If I'm, I will always think this is a lump of cells, where somebody who's, evangelical Christian believes it's life. I can't convince them otherwise. They can't convince me. And so the one thing that I think people have to keep in mind is that there is good faith on both sides of this. On the other side of this issue, on the Dobbs side of this issue, there is good faith. They think that they're prohibiting the murder of babies.
For sure.
Like it bothers
but
me
like
that we lose
respect
track
for
of that.
people who think differently than you has gone very much out of fashion.
Well, the problem, and this
So,
gets back to my
social
point.
media.
This gets back to my point, though. With I'm concerned that what has happened here in this process, the Dobbs decision, and the lead up to it, the confirmations, who was confirmed, how they were confirmed, etc. I don't know, man. I kind of feel like this could really hasten the unraveling of the rule of law in America, because I do think the court managed to delegitimize itself, and more so in blue states than in red states at this moment. But anyway, that was my my light topic of the day.
Dude,
so
you like ambushed me with that. Thing.
thank you for indulging in it.
Thanks, man. An unwilling passenger, ironically, in a conversation about
Yeah, but
abortion.
Well, listen, man. Like you can.
I
can
wanted
always
to abort
rely.
that conversation in its first trimester.
I can always rely on a Harvard guy to go to his Harvard material.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
So like
Fair enough.
for the rest of us who went to shit law school, it's not a shit law school, but you didn't go to Harvard. You've enlightened me.
My best friend went to Chicago County. He was a classmate of yours, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. We actually had we had 4 interns from Chicago County. They were stellar.
You had 4 interns this year?
Yeah, this summer. They
all
just
4
left.
of those fucking kids were from Chicago.
All 4 were from Chicago County. They were rock stars. Every single one. Like they were
first
awesome.
Of all, okay.
Okay.
Hot take.
My Harvard interns beat them in the race to find
literally
bad shit on social media.
I get interns from the University of Texas. They're fantastic.
It's the Harvard
I didn't
of
know
Texas.
you had 4. Yeah, that's a lot of interns. That's a. But the program's already done. It's like, but where are the interns? They're gone?
Well, it was 1 month. Yeah.
The internship lasts a month now, but you don't learn anything enough, and like they're not useful.
Oh, with me
month.
they learn a lot.
No,
I don't know about you,
exactly.
but
you get them locked.
I mean,
into
maybe you do things differently.
Some 9-hour conversations about abortion. What you learned in your internship? Well, it was great. Like, fucking fantastic. I do want to talk about this is a great segue, because
the worst advice. I thought
the worst
it should
advice.
go before
This
your
is
worst
like,
advice.
This is the hottest. I just had the hottest take. So, the University of Chicago Law School reached out to us and they said, we'd like to, our legal clinic would like to write a memo for you and your firm and some of the issues that you guys encounter. And I was like, that sounds great. And they're like, well, it's a real, it's a way for us to get, professional credit, and it's a way for, students to basically learn how the client relationship works and something to put on the resume. And I was like, fantastic. Love U Chicago, obviously. Really, really smart kids.
Oh, that's right. That was your
undergrad.
your
and they did a
yeah.
fantastic job. And they were these kids were so sharp. They were wonderful. I loved it. It was great for everyone involved. One of the kids reaches out to me and he says, hey, I know you said that you'd always give this offer for advice. And I basically want some advice. And so like the student I believe he has a summer internship at Kirkland and Ellis this summer, and
been there, done
plan, yeah, exactly. His plan was to go work in, he said corporate and M&A, and he wanted advice about like how to think about his career and his career development path when he's doing that. And mind you, this is like a great kid. He's done great work. He's really excited about his path. And I just like, I don't know if it like caught me on the wrong day or like I hadn't like, so I write him back. And this is always my advice to people that are in this position, that they're in law school, which you need to realize when you ask someone for advice, that they are only going to give you, like they're going to give you the lesson that they have wished they had taken, right? It's just not like, very few people are like, you know what, let me like consider all the angles here. A lot of times it's like, here's something that I wish I had known. So there's all sorts of heuristics that come into that, and you're like incredibly biased. And one thing that I wish I had known is at the time, my goal was I really want to be a federal prosecutor. I wanted to enter the U.S. Attorney's Office. I really wanted to be a lawyer. And I thought that it would be a little bit like some combination of television. I don't know what you thought when you did it or why you wanted to go, but that's really what I thought. And the practice of law was just like working at a big law firm was just brutal, and I hated every second of it. It obviously wasn't for me. And I really wish that I had like considered I was really path dependent. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the law firm because that's the opportunities that are here. The school's pushing you towards that. I really wish I had been entrepreneurial earlier on. I really wish I had.
It didn't take you that long.
Yeah, but it didn't take me that long. But I look back on it as like, I really wish that I had not, I wish I'd really questioned more that this notion that I idolize these professions and these jobs in which I had no idea because what the actual practice of the law would be like or what the actual experience was like. Because when I did it, I was like, holy fuck, I hate this. I hate it. And I think that I was pretty good about it. But like, I think a lot of people, because especially kids with a really set plan, they have a plan in life. And then, but they don't know, they haven't worked at an investment bank. They haven't like worked at a hedge fund. They haven't like been a lawyer, or even they haven't been a doctor. A guy that we know, Joe Lawler, went to medical school and then sometimes it's only when you actually get to start to do the practice of whatever it is you basically idolized and really were striving towards that you realize, or that you can have the realization that it's not really for you. Now that is by far the softest, best interpretation of the advice that I gave this poor kid. I responded with like the hottest take ever, which was like, I reread it because this kid hadn't responded in like 4 days. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's kind of weird. I gave him like an advice email, like, I wonder why. And I was like, oh, I better look what I said to him. Oh my God. It's so embarrassing. I have to like call this kid and apologize. It was like, you need to open yourself to the possibility that you don't know shit about your career and your plan. Like, you're type A, and he's like, you want to be the best lawyer you can be. I was like, that is incorrect. Your desire to succeed, achieve, and do a good job will likely keep you down the bad path longer than you need to be. And it was just this like pogrom. It was like so embarrassing looking back on it. I wrote this kid like single space lines. It was like the Unabomber manifesto about how his choices were wrong. And if he's watching, obviously.
No, but I'm not sure
and
that.
He still hasn't responded. It's been like 5 days. He's probably like, dude, this guy's a dick.
Well, I mean, that's wrong too, right? But
no, it's not.
To not respond? Especially after you wrote a manifesto for him?
Yeah, dude.
Come on.
It's not. It's not a cool. Not something I'm proud of.
No, I don't know. I take the other side of that. I mean, law is unique among those professions. And I figured this out when I went to law school, I went to law school to be a better entrepreneur and investor. I specifically did not intend to be a lawyer. I enjoyed law school my first year a lot more than I thought I would. So I thought, okay, you know what? Let me practice for a little bit. That'll make me a better entrepreneur and investor. So I did summer associate gig after my second year at Kirkland in Chicago and then Jones Day in Shanghai. And it was while I was at Kirkland in Chicago, it really hit home. So I'd been in investment bank and the idea there, and this is back before the financial crisis. So sell side guys used to make like massive money after, blah years when they got to MD. And the thing is though, their working hours tailed off. So you start out as an analyst, but that's a misnomer. You don't analyze shit. You just, but your working hours tail off. So by the time you're an MD and you're making, like 7-8 figs, you're not working like shit hours. But I went into this one Kirkland partner's office one day and it really hit home. This guy, I don't know, he probably was in his 50s, but he looked like absolute shit, just skin, bags under his eyes. It's like, pictures everywhere of him with his family, but it's always on vacation, right? It's not, hey, here we are.
This guy's got his BlackBerry in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, holy fuck, like this dude never sees the family except when he's on vacation. Like that's what these pictures tell me. And, he was making, somewhere in like, I don't know, low mid 7 figures, which 2004, but I was thinking, see, unlike finance or
100%.
Most other fields, it's like your hours don't go down, in law. So law is unique in that regard. The other thing that was kind of interesting.
But it's really difficult. Like I remember when I was a young lawyer, I had the same experience. I was working the night before Thanksgiving and I was like, this is miserable. But if I was in an investment bank or private equity firm, now I would be like, the hours are horrible, but I see down the hallway that basically like the hours in other professions like finance, the hours can get a lot better,
right?
And you can make a lot more money. But in the law, dude, the night before Thanksgiving, every light in the place was on.
No, this one lawyer said to me as I was applying to law school, he's and he didn't get that my plan was to not be a lawyer, but he said, here's the thing, to go into law, you have to really enjoy law, because you're going to
Yeah.
work more hours and make less money than your clients do. And that can be a bitter pill. And, you know, he's 100% correct. So I don't think you gave the guy bad advice. I mean, the one thing that also always struck me about lawyers is, you know, so many of them are personally timid. I mean, a lot of them are, you know, pretty, you know, I mean, a lot of them are
it's a risk-averse profession. It
that's
selects for risk aversion,
That's
right?
the thing. So when I went to Jones Day Shanghai, I was there, you know, like a year and a half or so, not even a year and a half. I left to start my own business. So my colleagues at Jones Day, former summer colleagues at Kirkland and Ellis, I mean, so many of them are like, wow, man, I really wish I could do that. Like and I'm thinking, the processing power of all of these people, I mean, these are smart people individually. I mean, people smarter than I am. Like, what's the difference between them and me?
They don't have Maui Jim sunglasses.
It's much worse what they have, dude. They're rocking much worse shit, okay? I mean, you should see, like, some dudes had their fucking pants up to their nipples. Like, that was never me. But sorry, like, what's the difference? The difference is I did it. They didn't. Like, they were really smart people. And so that really also hit home to me about the profession of law. It's just, yeah, the risk aversion on a personal level of the people who practice it. I also did learn soon thereafter, I guess, on that Myers-Briggs test, you know, the vast majority, a substantial majority of people in the U.S. Are extroverts versus being introverts. But law, at least when this data was collected, was the only profession on that list which the majority were actually introverts.
Is that true? That's interesting.
I mean, it was true.
Yeah. I don't know.
But I got to tell you, I've like, every day that goes by, I have more and more contempt for that profession and just kind of like the legal system in general. So,
okay.
It's, you know,
you
get sued less than I do, so you don't see what I see every day as Warren G.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah. I mean, look, it certainly has problems, right? And I think yeah.
I mean, what are you running for political office here? Like,
I don't know, but
okay.
You're not leaving with you a lot. You want to go back to trying to debate how many people in the world are circumcised? Like,
I wasn't a debate. Well, I don't know.
I don't even know where we go from here.
Well, that was your topic. You put it on the board.
We're not doing that.
No? Okay. I mean, I was curious to hear what your opening gambit on that was, because I don't really have a view.
Look, I don't want to spoil it if it's an interview.
How much time do you spend thinking about cock? I guess is what that
it's a function of how many hours I spend naked in front of the mirror, probably.
Looking for it, or
yeah, something like that. I'm glad we got some dick jokes in today. I was hoping we would.
Yeah, no, I mean,
just in case anyone was like, of the 5 people watching this, we're like, is this going to be a classy show? We're like, yeah, let's get some.
Yeah, no, I mean, we got to stay true to form.
Yeah,
this is a little more serious than it normally is. So
yeah, because you like ambushed me with abortion.
No, dude, you were on this you're taking the Japan activism thing seriously, and I just want to talk about your hairs being plucked and studied by Japanese kids. Seriously.
Fair enough. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
I know, really appreciate it. Thanks for, standing in for Freddy, in honor of Freddy and in honor of Krista. So
okay.
Thanks, man.
All right, man. Thanks.
Cheers.